Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. It's my pleasure this morning to review a book which I found very curious, but it's a book that I really did find fascinating to look at. Bearing in mind I've always been interested in the history of the common law, the way we've approached it over the centuries and given it as a gift to many other countries. This book is called Introduction to South Pacific Law. Place I've never been. I've been to the Pacific, but not that part. This is the fourth edition anyway. It's the South Pacific area. It's been written by two people, Jennifer Corrin and Don Paterson, and it's been published by Intersentia Ltd, who are an academic publishers based in Cambridge and Belgium. Now, Elizabeth and I went through this book. We thought it was a fascinating book. My wife, in fact, spent many years in Vancouver, so we know the North Pacific rim, but not the South Pacific. So it was interesting to see this, even just from our own relatively limited knowledge of that part of the world. Now, we gave for our book review title the following title: Ideal for International Lawyers, a unique and carefully researched overview of South Pacific law. And I have to say I had no idea what it was until I read this book, and I'm actually a lot more the wiser. Let's have a look at it. Lovely cover. Very sort of HMS Bounty cover. There's the front anyway. There's the spine, and then there's the back. A very interesting part of the world. In fact, my uncle spent a lot of time there himself in the South Pacific before, during, and after the war. That's the Second World War. So he knew it, but I can't speak to him. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. There is the index to the actual book. It's not a big index at all, but there's a useful glossary which I found helpful because there are words used which won't be particularly understandable possibly to some of us. Now, it's paragraph numbered and there are footnotes as well. If we go to the front of the book, we've then got a nice front cover there. Then you've got some information, which is the information about the book, and then do read the preface. The preface is very important because this is a new edition. It's the fourth edition. The preface was written in April 2016, and there have been a few little changes, so do read the author's notes. Then you've got the contents section itself, very substantial amount of contents, quite detailed, looking at various types of substantive law issues, tort, criminal, etc., contract. Then state courts, we're looking at the various islands are mentioned, Fiji being of course one among them. That's where my uncle was. Then you've got abbreviations. Then after that you've got the table of cases, and interesting cases as well. Then after that, legislation and constitutions, because again you're looking at a whole collection of islands and different ways of doing things. Again, there's quite a large amount of stuff in that particular area. And then you get to, after that, the end of that, you get to Chapter 1, South Pacific Law and Jurisprudence, which I think is a very good starting off point because you want to look at the legal theory and the origins of how the legal systems have come about, which of course has started a piece of history. And then of course the book runs through and you can see just opening it how it's set out. I found it a fascinating book to read. I actually think I'd seen it in the bookshops in the past, and it was one that I thought that looked a very interesting area of law as something rather different from the normal stuff that I get in with my own practice and so forth. So what do we say about the book? Well, the book is apparently unique. It's the only book of its kind and therefore quite a find for international lawyers, especially those involved with work relating to the countries of the South Pacific, in other words, the islands. Notice that they're called countries rather than islands by the authors. That's Professors Jennifer Corrin and Don Paterson, who in addition to their other impressive credentials, teach respectively at the University of Queensland and the University of the South Pacific. Now, the book has been published by the academic publishers Intersentia, based in Cambridge, Antwerp and Portland, Oregon. And the title is now the fourth edition of an informative and therefore eminently useful introduction to an area of law which many lawyers, or indeed students and academics, may not be at all familiar with. I'm certainly not. I've read a few books, for instance, about Pitcairn. Another uncle went to Pitcairn because he'd been in the Navy. Again, a lot of this information is only gleaned, and understanding only gleaned from what I've seen on television and films and so forth. But the book itself is both readable and scholarly, and it focuses on the laws of the member countries of the University of the South Pacific, which we'll list here. Cook Islands, Fiji, Kiribati, Marshall Islands, Nauru, Niue, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Tokelau, Tonga, Tuvalu and Vanuatu. Now, we've obviously got a wide range of islands there. 3 ethnicities predominate within the island groups of this vast region, and they are the Melanesians, the Polynesians and the Micronesians. Now, I have to say I don't know anything. I know a little bit about the Polynesians. I've seen the Kon-Tiki film and I've read Tor Heyerdahl's Trip to Easter Island. But apart from that, I've got very little knowledge, which is why I felt this book was of great assistance to people outside this particular hemisphere of activity. Following an introductory chapter then on the history and development of South Pacific law and jurisprudence, the book examines the framework of legal systems across this area, many of which are based on or have specific links with the English common law, which is of course to be expected, bearing in mind where Australia is, where New Zealand is, and of course where Canada is, the States. So you can see the understanding of that development. And in one particular chapter, for example, there is an illuminating discussion of the relationship between custom and customary law on the one hand and common law and equity on the other. Interesting because of the way that the common law developed from custom. Now, individual chapters cover all pertinent aspects of the law in this region, including administrative law, customary law, constitutional law, family law, contract law and torts law itself, law of tort. Now, there's much reference to legislative provisions and case law within individual jurisdictions, and the new edition is in a handy paperback format, which have gone through extensive revisions to incorporate the changes which have taken place since the last edition of 2011. That's including additional discussions of the law of Papua New Guinea, PNG. Now, other new material covers mainly recent legislative developments that have occurred in, for example, Fiji and Samoa. Amendments to the constitutions of courts in Marshall Islands, Tonga and the Solomon Islands are discussed together with the other regional changes in the law. Now, that's not going to be relevant really to many of us, but I do think with a global structure that we now have of the way we're looking at things, it's very interesting to see the way that these particular communities have developed. Now, let me conclude by saying this. As the authors point out, interest in South Pacific law has been on the increase, although still under-researched. And here's where this book obviously makes a valuable contribution. It's extensively footnoted with about 75 pages of tables of cases, legislation and constitutions, and it excels, I think, as a work of reference, written fortunately in a most accessible and readable style, with fascinating insights into the history and varied cultures of the South Pacific region. So from students to seasoned practitioners, anyone interested in South Pacific law should regard this book as an essential purchase. We certainly do, and I found it a very interesting read. I shall look forward to the 5th edition in due course. The publication date is cited, I believe, at 2017, but in fact I believe the actual work itself was produced probably towards the end of 2016. Let's have a look at the book again. There's the middle of it. You can see what's in it. This is about administrative law, because what you've got, as I say, you've got at the beginning all the substantive law areas nicely covered. Family law is covered in chapter 7, contract law, tort law, land law and so forth. And then you've got the state courts at the end, which again I thought was very interesting. It's not something that one would particularly have a lot of knowledge of, but it's interesting to see how the development in this particular jurisdiction or these jurisdictions has developed. A lovely book anyway, so thank you to Jennifer and Don very much for the book, and to Intersentia for producing it. It's a good read. Do have a look at it when you've got some time. Thank you very much to all. Bye bye.